him in this sacred space that he honored with his presence and his words. This morning, we'll recall and reflect upon the many places he instilled with holiness during his lifetime. It is written that in every person there is a private shrine of memory and love, and in that sanctuary our loved ones abide. We sense their presence, caress their spirits, and enfold them in our hearts. They talk to us. They tell tales. Thus, the pain of separation is soothed by memory. The hurt sustained is healed by love, and we ourselves become purified and ennobled through our sorrow. We join together today to celebrate Senator Lieberman's life, his words and actions, and to express both consolation and thanksgiving for having been blessed by his presence in our lives, our nation, and our world. Jewish tradition instructs us to stand with those who mourn so that they may feel the presence of the community. In recognition of our shared loss, we turn to words from our sacred scriptures that provide strength and comfort in this moment. We'll join in the words of Psalm 23. If these words are familiar to you, even if different from the version I'm reciting, please join me with the words that speak to you. With God as my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You guide me in right paths for the sake of your name. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. Amen.
Hadassah, to Joe's children, Hani, Matt, Rebecca, Ethan, to his sisters, Rietta and Ellen, to all of the grandchildren, Prime Minister Netanyahu, my fellow former Vice President Mike Pence, Mrs. Pence, to all my former colleagues in the Senate and the House, Leader McConnell and Elaine Chao especially, and to all of the distinguished guests. I'm here for one reason only. Honor Joe Lieberman and to bear witness to his remarkably faith-filled life, that it was so rich in kindness and decency, principle, and great achievements for his nation. We can say of Joe the very best we can say of any man. His was a life of constant consequence for his family, his friends, his nation. I knew Joe long before I had the honor of asking him to run alongside me in the election for president and vice president 24 years ago. I knew him when he was Attorney General of Connecticut. And then, of course, we became colleagues and allies and very, very close friends in the Senate. We shared views on many issues: the climate crisis, women's rights, gay and lesbian rights, human rights. So many causes that we fought together. We also were allies when we were sometimes in the small minority in our own political party. Back when he was a Democrat, we were some of the only ones that voted in favor of President George H.W. Bush's military action in Iraq. We were in the minority in our own party on some nuclear weapons issues, and we became very close. He had friends in both parties, as all of you know, and there are people from both parties here and will speak today. There's been talk recently of Venn diagrams in our country. I think the thinnest overlay of a Venn diagram between Democrats and Republicans is right there where Joe Lieberman is. He wrote about how I became a Shabbos goy for him. And when the Senate would run overtime on Friday evenings and the Sabbath would begin, I often offered to take him over to an apartment my parents had in the Methodist building. Here's a Southern Baptist taking an observant Jew to the Methodist building and turning the lights on and then turning the lights off when I left and so forth. And anyway, we became extremely close. And then during that campaign of 2000, we became kin, really. Our families became kin too, Hadassah. We laughed together, and we fought like hell together, and we prayed together. We thought for a season we had won together. And I learned a lot from Joe, including a few words of Yiddish, and I was already familiar with the word mensch, but I did not know its full meaning until I got to be a good friend of Joe Lieberman. And if you want to know its full and true meaning, you can skip the dictionary and just look at the way Joe Lieberman lived his life. He put friendship over anger. He practiced reconciliation as a form of grace. I believe we can all learn from Joe's life some critical lessons about how we might heal the rancor in our nation today. I speak from personal experience because after that 2000 race, Joe and I developed some very deep disagreements on policy and political matters, and no matter how hard I tried or how hard Joe tried, we could not convince the other of the merit of our respective positions. And those of you who've had arguments with Joe know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not an accident that he would often break out into song, usually his favorite song, Frank Sinatra's My Way. How many people have heard him sing My Way? I know, and yes, all right, that was a frequent occurrence on the campaign trail. And I've thought about those days a lot because in spite of our disagreements in those days, we both knew deep down that the strong foundation of our friendship and the values that we shared in common were so much stronger than what was driving us apart in those years. I've found myself thinking about Joe frequently over the last 3 months since he passed and since the service in Stanberry, Connecticut. And what stands out above everything else in my memories of Joe is the way that his Jewish faith was so foundational to the purpose with which he lived his life. I spent some time trying to capture that in my own words and did some research since the service in Connecticut. And ultimately, I found that he, not surprisingly, said it better than I possibly could. So if you will allow me, I would like to share with you some of Joe's words about the connection between his faith and his purpose. He wrote, I was raised in a religiously observant family, which gave me the clear answers of faith to life's most difficult questions. My parents and my rabbi, Joseph Ehrenkrantz, taught me that our lives were a gift from God, the Creator, and with it came a covenantal obligation to serve God with gladness by living as best we could, according to the law and values that God gave Moses on Mount Sinai. He continued, the summary of our aspirations was in the Hebrew phrase tikkun olam, which is translated to improve the world or to repair the world, or more boldly, to complete what God began. In any translation, this concept of tikkun olam presumes the inherent but unfulfilled goodness of people and requires action for the benefit of the community. Now, I want to note that he was not naive in believing that his faith would automatically clear away all obstacles and lead to the success of any endeavor. He went on. Speaking of Tikkun Olam, he said, "It accepts our imperfections and concludes that we as individuals and as a society are constantly in the process of improving and becoming complete. Each of us has the opportunity and responsibility to advance that process both within ourselves and in the wider world around us." He quoted Rabbi Tarfon in the Talmud, who said, "The day is short and there is so much work to be done. You are not required to complete the work yourself, but you cannot withdraw from it either." And he concluded, "These beliefs were a powerful force in my upbringing and seem even more profound and true to me today." Even as a college student, he started the work of Tikkun Olam, a time of danger for those pushing for civil rights and voting rights there. He took this philosophy to heart on an issue that we worked on together, addressing the global climate crisis. He talked about how extreme events were becoming a more regular and now daily occurrence. He once said, "Today we can see with our own eyes what global warming is doing. And in that context, it becomes truly irresponsible, if not immoral, to not do something." By the way, yesterday was the hottest day in recorded history. It broke the record of one day earlier. Today may break it again. What to do? Joe argued, and I quote, "Global warming is not a conqueror to kneel before, but a challenge to rise to, a challenge we must rise to." And he was brimming with ideas on how we could solve this challenge. First and foremost, by putting a value on improving the world, on putting a value for the fate of future generations over politics. Just 2 years ago, Joe wrote of the urgent need for bipartisanship on the climate crisis. And for those of you gathered here who admired his commitment to the highest values and morals, listen, please. He said, "There is much more that our government will need to do to avoid future climate-caused disasters, and it will be done best if members of both parties are working together to find solutions." Here in America, we continue to grapple with the vitriol and fear that have threatened to drive us apart. Around the world, democracy is under threat. Humanity itself faces an existential crisis of our own making if we continue to use the sky as an open sewer. These parallel crises beg the question, can the world be repaired? Can we muster the courage to reject the rancor that threatens to define this current moment? I believe we can. I believe the concept of Tikkun Olam that was central to the life and work of Joe Lieberman can be found in all of the morally based movements that have characterized humanity's progress. In all those movements, advocates at times felt despair. But when the underbrush was cleared away and the central issue was defined as a choice between right and wrong, then at a very deep level, the outcome became foreordained. Repairing the world is our moral imperative. Joe Lieberman lived his life fully with a deep awareness and appreciation of that moral imperative and the responsibilities it required of him. So today, to remember him is to refresh not only our hope, but our dedication to Tikkun Olam. May God bless the Lieberman family.